The Alberta government has started a national advertising campaign which tells Canadians about the potential costs of the federal government's proposed electricity regulations. Premier Danielle Smith says her government will do what it must to fight Ottawa. This if it tries to impose a net zero electricity grid by 2035. Ms. Smith says that includes using the province's Sovereignty Act, which grants Alberta the power to reject federal rules and programs that it deems to be unconstitutionally interfering in the areas of provincial responsibility. Her government is targeting 2050 for a net zero grid. Well, joining us now to discuss the dispute between Alberta and Ottawa is Mr. Cole Hogan, principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. Sir, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
So can we go over these specific concerns expressed by Premier Smith's government regarding this upcoming 2035 timeline for the net zero grid?
Of course. The main concern here seems to be around concerns of energy reliability and affordability. Alberta has the same goals as the federal government, but at 2050 instead of 2035. The government says the 2035 timeline will compromise affordable energy for Albertans, and that the 2050 timeline will give Alberta the time needed to advance their energy grid and hit those goals.
And just how much is the government of Alberta claiming that this net zero grid timeline for 2035 would potentially cost Canadians in these ads? And what sort of evidence and research do they point to?
Well, they're costing this whole net zero plan at about 1.7 trillion, which is nearly the size of the entire Canadian economy in 2023. But the federal plan isn't such a big deal for Ontario and Quebec. Almost all electricity in those provinces is produced by hydro or nuclear. The Fed's net zero plan would bring some big changes to Alberta, where 85% of the electricity is produced from natural gas and coal. Not only does that take time and money, but it would also take years of environmental assessments, consultation with Indigenous groups, getting access to the land. In the meantime, produce some unreliable energy for Albertans. The sources for those claims are coming from the Conference Board of Canada, the IESO in Ontario, as well as some other stats provided by the Public Policy Forum.
All right, sounds like it's more of a longer initiative for Alberta. Now, from your over decade of experience in spearheading political campaigns and ads, what does a national campaign of this magnitude mean for the current state of Canada's federal-provincial relations, particularly with Alberta?
Well, it means they're serious. Having been involved in multiple national campaigns myself, I'll tell you that you don't put this much money into a campaign like this unless you mean business. And clearly, Alberta means business.
And critics of this campaign have argued that this is a waste of taxpayer money or a misuse of taxpayer money. What is your view on that?
I don't think that argument has complete merit. The government of Alberta has an electoral mandate to communicate their message and goals to the Canadian public at large. We've seen previous campaigns like this from the government of Alberta broadcasting out to Canada. If you recall the Alberta is Calling campaign, Alberta was running advertising in cities like Toronto saying, hey, Alberta has the highest wages, the lowest taxes. You can probably afford a house here. Come on over and move to Alberta. That campaign was a success, and I'm betting this one will be too.
So what reaction has this ad campaign garnered from Canadians so far?
Well, if I take a step back, I think that the biggest issues in Canada right now are affordability and the cost of living. The average rent has doubled over the past 8 years. Groceries are more expensive than ever, and people are legitimately worried about paying their bills. When they see that their federal government is planning to make their lives more expensive, their energy more unreliable, they're rightly concerned. So that's why I'm seeing the campaign get some legitimate positive pickup online and getting media attention across the country.
All right, Mr. Hogan, a little over a minute left here, but this campaign seems to be the first big step in Alberta's rebuttal against this proposed net zero timeline for 2035. What other steps can you see the province taking in the near future? We know that Ms. Smith has said she may invoke the Sovereignty Act, but is that necessarily the next step for Alberta?
Yeah, the Sovereignty Act, as the Premier stated before, is a tool in her toolbox. I don't think that she's wanting to use it, but if it gets to that point, through the public opinion polling I've seen, it's not in favor of the net zero goals by 2035, especially when it comes at a huge expense to the taxpayer or results in higher electricity bills. In a recent other poll that I've seen, only 15% of Canadians said that the net zero goals were realistic. So if Danielle Smith wants to come out fighting on this one, I think she has public opinion on her side.
All right, Mr. Hogan, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.